Fulgrim, also known as the Phoenician, is the Primarch of the Emperor's Children, the 3rd Legion of the Legio Astartes. He was one of the traitor Primarchs who sided with the War Master, Horus Lupercal, against the Emperor of Mankind during the events of the Horus Heresy. Fulgrim's fall to chaotic corruption began during his Legion's campaign of compliance upon the world of Laer, where his Legion fought against a savage Xenos race known as the Laer. Within the Great Temple on Laer, surrounded by many of the Xenos who were conducting a vast ritualistic orgy, was a pedestal that bore a weapon that would be known as the Silver Blade of the Laer, or the Laer Blade. The blade was in itself a demon weapon, containing a demon of the Chaos god Slaanesh bound within it. This demon would, over time, influence Fulgrim's behaviour, a subtle voice in the back of Fulgrim's mind, which in turn would slowly bend Fulgrim, and soon the majority of the 3rd Legion, towards the worship of Slaanesh over the course of many years. During the events of the Istvan V Dropsite massacre, Fulgrim would duel his loyalist brother, Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands Legion. Despite inflicting grievous wounds upon one another, Fulgrim would eventually defeat Ferrus Manus in single combat. It was then when the demon within the Laer Blade began to urge Fulgrim to kill his brother.
Finish him! Kill him! He must die! Otherwise he will kill you! Kill him before he kills you! Now!
Fulgrim would then decapitate Ferrus Manus, the Laer Blade seemingly moving of its own volition, despite Fulgrim's attempt to deflect or pull the blow. Fulgrim would then realise the consequences of his actions as he grieved for his brother.
What have I done? Throne, save me. What have I done? He's dead. I killed him. He was my brother.
Such was Fulgrim's grief that he even attempted suicide, although the demon within the Laer Blade prevented him from doing so. However, the demon within the Laer Blade offered Fulgrim oblivion so that Fulgrim would no longer feel the grief caused by his fratricidal actions. As it turned out, the demon within the Laer Blade would possess Fulgrim's body, using it as its new vessel, while Fulgrim's soul would be trapped within one of the many portraits of the Primarch. Following his body's possession by the demonic entity, Fulgrim's personality began to noticeably change. For example, Fulgrim would speak of battles and past campaigns, not as one who experienced them firsthand, but as one who had merely heard tales told about them. Soon after this, Fulgrim would journey into the Eye of Terror alongside his brother Perturabo of the Iron Warriors Legion, to search for a weapon known as the Angel Exterminatus, although Fulgrim would later admit that this was a lie constructed in order for Fulgrim to drain Perturabo of his energy to use in a ritual to allow Fulgrim to ascend to demonhood, a feat in which he would indeed accomplish, becoming a demon prince of the Chaos god Slaanesh. However, given the fact that Fulgrim himself was possessed by a demonic entity, as well as clearly having been shown as feeling grief for the death of Ferrus Manus, is it possible for Fulgrim to ever redeem himself for his actions? Could Fulgrim ever become the man he once was? Now, while some believe that Fulgrim is still currently possessed by the demon of the Laer Blade, it's important to note that this is simply not the case. While many within the Emperor's Children Legion did indeed believe that Fulgrim was not himself, including the likes of Lucius, Caesoron and Verosian, this was due in part to Fulgrim having given himself over to Slaanesh in exchange for untold power that was itself wielded by the demonic entity within the Laer Blade. Fulgrim would obtain this new power and a newfound purpose to obtain demonhood, while at the same time exorcising the demon from his body and imprisoning it within a portrait of his that was painted by one of the many artists that used to congregate upon his ship, the Pride of the Emperor. In Fulgrim's own words about the incident,
I was vulnerable. A servant of the Dark Prince took my flesh for its own amusement. It was an ancient thing, a needy, capricious thing, that revelled in its stolen prize, and for a time, I allowed it to retain possession of my body while I learned of it and its powers. I think it hoped I would be crushed by the death of my brother. It should have known better. After all, it had started me down the road of self-indulgence and a life free of inhibition or guilt. What did I care for one more betrayal? Manus was already a fading memory, a ghost who recedes with each passing moment, and everything I learned from it only made me stronger. In time, it was a simple matter to reclaim my body and to cast it into the prison it had crafted for me.
Indeed, Fulgrim had learned many new abilities from the demon of the Laer blade, such as the art of flesh shaping. Flesh shaping itself is the ability to radically modify the flesh of oneself and the flesh of others. Fulgrim would use his newly acquired abilities in flesh shaping to slaughter the crew of a Warhound Titan. But this use of fleshcraft also seemed to extend to his own physiology, which Fulgrim had seemingly began to deliberately alter in preparation of his ascension to demonhood, which the Emperor's Children Legion's chief apothecary, Fabius Bile, would confirm.
A change in the composition of his blood and flesh. It is as though his molecular structure has begun to dissolve the bonds linking its constituent parts into a cohesive whole. It's quite fascinating, you understand. It is as though his form is preparing for some great ascension, a wondrous shedding of a redundant form, as his flesh is remade into something extraordinary.
Now, while the remaining traitor Primarchs had all ascended to demonhood, Fulgrim was the first to do so, and in fact, with the possible exception of the Wordbearer's Primarch Laer, was the first to actively try and achieve apotheosis into becoming an immortal creature of the warp. In fact, Fulgrim had no qualms about attempting to murder his brother Perturabo in order to achieve this goal, which in itself was a stark contrast to some of the other traitor Primarchs, such as Angron of the World Eaters Legion, who only managed to ascend to the status of Demon Prince thanks to the actions of his brother Laer. As a result, it seems unlikely that Fulgrim could ever achieve any form of redemption. In fact, Fulgrim, out of all the Demon Primarchs, would also potentially be the one who would never even consider searching for atonement for his actions, which is emphasised further by the casual disregard of his beloved brother Ferrismanus' memory. A moment of grief long discarded as an irrelevant memory of a time from when he was weaker. For now, the Primarch of the Emperor's Children rules a world of pleasure and indulgence and is indeed a favoured minion of the Chaos God Slaanesh. For Fulgrim now has no time for mortal frivolities such as the concept of honour or dignity or even guilt. All that matters to him now is that he rules a world where he can indulge in the perfections of every kind of twisted pleasure imaginable by the minds of mortal men. What do you think? Do you think Fulgrim can ever be redeemed? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.